Welcome to episode 107 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who's glad he survived his drive to campus today, John Scott Sloat.
Yeah, it's a little icy out there.
Yeah, and you've got typically it's a 20 to 25 minute commute.
Yeah, 20 to 25 minute commute. And, I was driving down the road, US 30, for those of you familiar with the northern Indiana corridor there.
Yeah.
And, had 100 yards till I got to a stoplight. Slammed on the brakes, it turned yellow, and I just slid. Mostly in a straight line, so no big deal, and stopped before I got to the stoplight. There was no one around me. I went, oh, okay, so that's how it's going to be.
Yes.
And drove accordingly the rest of the way here.
Yeah. Would you call it black ice? Or was it still, could you kind of tell that it's, black ice is basically invisible to the eye?
I thought it was a little shiny. It was maybe opaque ice.
Opaque. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good to know where it fits on the color scale.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And are you adopting a new voice right now?
I am. Yes. I've decided to go an octave lower.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying it out just for the week.
Okay.
We'll see how that goes.
Maybe next week too.
We'll see. We'll see. Speaking of next episode,
if we can get the audio in time. Yeah.
I'm confident we can.
Okay.
Our next episode is going to be a live episode.
Yep.
In chapel here at Grace College.
Yep.
How you feeling about that?
I don't know. Nervous, weird.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm used to the privacy of our little our little ice box here. And,
former vault, now closet.
Yeah. With foam on the walls and everything. And chapel's just another beast entirely.
Yeah, I find myself vacillating back and forth between this could be really good. This could also be a disaster.
Yeah.
And hoping for something in between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it'll be fine.
I think it'll be fine too.
Yeah. It's something different.
Yeah. Although we always get emails anytime we don't have a standard not me, our chaplain, always gets messages. Why aren't we preaching the word in chapel?
Yeah.
That's always sort of the response from a section of our students, regardless of what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which you appreciate the desire to hear God's word taught, but that tends to misunderstand what chapel is.
Yes. Chapel is not the local church, stuff like that. Anyway.
Indeed. So, I guess if you're in the area, you could pop by.
Stop by the MOCC
10:30.
Yep.
At the Manahan Orthopedic Capital Center.
This Friday,
January 21st. You can be part of the live audience. So if you want to get in contact with the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. Email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, Various and Sundry Podcast. And we would still appreciate any effort to give us a review and a 5-star rating on whatever platform you access the podcast. So let's talk excuse me. Whoa. Let's talk a little sports. John, did you watch any playoff football this weekend?
I did. I watched quite a bit of playoff football.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I caught bits of each game. And there's still one to go. We're recording on Monday. There's still one to go tonight, which is different.
And that's Rams-Cardinals, right?
Yeah. Hopefully a close game. My general thought on the weekend of football was the first game, Raiders-Bengals, was the best game.
Yeah, entertaining.
And everything else was kind of a blowout and a little bit boring. Although I did thoroughly enjoy the Bills stomping
Oh, that
the
was
Patriots.
delightful. Yeah.
I was rooting for them to get to 50.
Yes, that was nice. I was grateful to see that. The other thing, here's what I wonder. This year they expanded the playoffs. They added a team. Does that contribute to the blowouts that we've seen, where you've got a team in that last year wouldn't have made it?
Sure.
So have we diluted the playoff pool to the point where you're going to get more of these since you added an extra team?
Maybe. But we had 3 of 4 of those this weekend. We're pretty much just blowouts.
3 of 5.
Was it 3 of 5? Oh, we still have 1 to go.
Well, no, there were 2 games Saturday and 3 games yesterday.
Oh, you're right.
Niners and Cowboys.
Cowboys. Which was actually
was not
a closer
blowout.
game.
It was a competitive game. I mean, the Niners had a lead the entire game.
Yeah, that's true. Did you hear Dak Prescott after that game, by the way?
I didn't. I saw the clip of how the game ended, and I saw Mike McCarthy complain about the officials not spotting the ball fast enough.
Okay, so Dak Prescott goes to his press conference after the game, which has to be a horrible experience for all players after they lose a big game like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So some grace there, right? But goes, yeah, and the fans were throwing all sorts of stuff at us, cans and batteries, all sorts of things. And a guy in the press goes, well, Dak, they were trying to hit the referees. And he goes, something to the extent of, this isn't a direct quote. He goes, oh, good for them.
No, you can't do that.
And so that's blowing up on social a little bit last night.
Yeah. One of the cardinal rules of being an athlete is you can't say negative things about the fans, your own fans. You can. It's dumb probably to say negative things about any fans because it never works out in your favor.
Sure.
But when you're applauding them for trying to hurt officials, that's never a good thing.
Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird comment by Dak. Although I get it, like this. Although Dak made a dumb play by the quarterback sneak. It's the year of the bad quarterback sneak.
Well, but who? I mean, is that his fault? He probably didn't call that play, did he?
I don't know. There's a question of whether it was a play call or whether it was Dak just sort of improvising in the moment.
But someone pointed out. I think it was maybe Tony Dungy was pointing out that part of Dak's mistake was that when he slid down to go down, he didn't hand the ball to an official. He just sort of laid it on the turf, which then, the center comes up to get over top of it. The official comes in to move it back a half yard to spot it properly.
Yep.
Bobbles the ball, and, that costs the extra second that prevents them from clocking it. But, the reality is the odds of them winning that game were still incredibly low.
Yeah.
They would have had one play from the 25 to score.
That's better than a Hail Mary, which is what some other fans were calling for. Yeah.
It is. So, in any case, and there's all that history and expectation with the Cowboys and their terrible record in the playoffs in the last 25, 30 years. So
I did enjoy the 3 plays to get to the spot where they were. I thought they were well-designed, good plays.
But,
yeah, the drive itself was who's the coordinator there? It's
Kellen Moore, I think.
Yeah, the former Boise State quarterback. Yeah. I thought they were inventive. They were fun, well executed by the team. So
he is definitely a creative offensive mind for sure.
Yeah.
So and
steals plays from the Jets, by the way.
There you go. And hats off to the Bengals for winning their first playoff game in 30 years.
Yes. I saw a tweet that the first text message about a Bengals playoff victory was sent this on Saturday.
Yes. Yeah, the last time they won a playoff game, I was a freshman in college.
91, right? Is that right? Is it 92?
Would have been 92.
Okay. Was Boomer Esiason their quarterback at that time?
I believe so, yeah.
Man, and it feels like he's been a staple at CBS in the room for 15 years now.
For sure. So, it would be nice to get some more competitive games moving forward than what we saw this weekend. Yeah. I think we will. Inevitably that happens. But and the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career. We should probably make note of that.
It's over.
It's done. Big Ben is no more.
It's no more.
Yeah.
Well, he's still going to exist and be a human, I assume.
That's my assumption as well. Let's briefly hit on the NBA. We don't pay much attention to NBA until about this time of the year, typically. So I had to actually look at the standings for the NBA and the Eastern and Western Conference, and I was a little surprised. The Bulls are number 1 in the East.
Yeah, the Bulls are coming out of nowhere.
So it's Bulls, Nets, Heat, and Bucks. And maybe the biggest surprise out of the Eastern Conference is that the Cavaliers are in 6th.
Yeah.
So, it's early. A lot of time for that to change. But the Nets, I think, finally this past week had a game where they had Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving playing together, which was only it's some ridiculously low number of times they've actually played an NBA game together on the same team, despite the fact that they've been on the same roster for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I did hear this question on sports radio, and I'm wondering what your take would be. Would LeBron James be better off being back on the Cavs, of just staying in Cleveland?
Well, as the teams are currently constructed, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But, in the meantime, he did win a title with the Lakers.
Did. Yeah, that's true.
And the Cavs have been terrible until this year. Terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know why anyone thought the Lakers roster would work this year. I mean, they're in 8th in the conference. They're still going to make the playoffs probably. But they have a great team if it was 2013.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, all guys that you're these guys are well past their prime.
Mm-hmm. Particularly Carmelo.
And then injured.
Yeah.
So, and Anthony Davis seems brittle as well, who's their younger star. So, anyway. And then in the Western Conference, it's Suns, Warriors, Jazz, and Grizzlies. I think the Grizzlies are a little bit of a surprise. But the Jazz are always one of those teams that's good in the regular season and just can't seem to make a deep run in the playoffs.
Donovan Mitchell is always fun.
He is a fun player to watch.
And a Mets fan, by the way.
Oh, well, good to know.
I'm not sure if you're aware.
I was not. Thank you for that tidbit.
Always wears Mets gear. Anyway.
Okay.
But I think the Western Conference is basically we assumed it would be probably Denver's a little lower than I expected them to be, being 6th. But the Suns, they were in the finals last year. The Warriors are healthy again.
Right. They just got Klay Thompson back.
Yeah.
I think Draymond has had some nagging injury stuff as well. So now that they've got their team back together, I would not be surprised to see them make a serious run for, the top spot in the West. I mean, based on what it looks like now, it looks like you're setting up for a Suns-Warriors Western Conference final matchup.
Which would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If it didn't start at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, that's true. Way past your bedtime.
Way past, yes. I've been asleep for an hour at that point. Yeah.
Indeed. So, well, speaking of getting to bed at a good time, today our topic is building habits. So, we had one of our powerful planning sessions. Was that, last week?
I think it might have been 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to actually, get out in front of content management when it comes to the pod. And saw an article on the Gospel Coalition website about building habits, and we'll reference that along the way at some point. That article is more about things you can do to fill in gaps within the day. If you've got a little 2-minute gap here, a 3-minute gap here, 30 seconds between things that you can do to fill that, and we'll circle back to that, but. I thought it would be a good launching point for us to talk about building habits. We've talked about goals for the new year, and people are still probably in that window of, trying to hit those goals or New Year's resolutions or whatever at this point, and probably feeling the tension of maybe not successfully hitting those at this point. So let's start with just some basic. Why is building habits an important thing? Why is it something that you would say is important to pursue intentionally building habits?
Sure. I think I'd point out that we naturally have habits, that we naturally have rhythms, but I think our sinful nature and those sorts of things cause us to build oftentimes unhealthy habits. habits. I think an unhealthy habit that's out there right now that we've all grown into, might be the proper term, is looking at our phones every 30 to 50 seconds.
True.
I think that happens naturally. I think the difference is we have to build better habits and build structures and ways that are good for us.
Yeah, inevitably, we're going to fall into patterns of behavior. And the question is not, do you have habits? The question is, what is the quality of those habits? And recognizing that ultimately habits play a significant role in shaping who we become, the kind of person we are. And that if we're not intentional about building the right kind of habits, we will default to the kinds of habits that often make us worse human beings rather than better ones.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes in habit building underestimate what we can do with a little bit of time.
Yes.
I think that TGC article does a good job of pointing that out, right? We underestimate what we can do with 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here, and overestimate the amount of joy that comes from just sort of like, I'm going to look at my phone for the next 10 minutes, or I'm going to scroll Facebook for an hour, or whatever it is.
Yeah, very true. Very true. In some ways, I think you get into the area of part of the difficulty is intentionally building good habits takes effort. Defaulting into bad habits generally doesn't take effort at all.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it becomes a matter of intentionality when it comes to that. So we've kind of touched on this, but why do you think building habits is so challenging?
Well, I mean, I think we've said it a little bit, right? That we just kind of naturally want to do whatever we want to do in a particular moment. We want to follow our own heart. We're sinful at our core, right? And I think that makes building things that are ultimately good for us in the long run, but have very little short-term return, are difficult for us to build.
Yeah, I agree. I think the intentionality required to build good habits is one factor. I think as well, just generally speaking, when we set out to build good habits, we're looking at ways that we can improve our lives in some capacity, whether it's our health, whether it's our spiritual life, or other areas. And just the level of effort and intentionality that it takes can make that, I think, more challenging than just the default position of kind of going wherever our natural desires or impulses take us.
Yeah. I think a good example of this that I've done is, and this is not spiritual in any way, although maybe backdoor spiritual, is we, Andrea and I, for a time would come home and go, what are we eating? And we would end up eating not good food for us, just pretty, like, well, let's run to this fast food place or let's order from this restaurant.
Yeah.
And eventually we got in a good habit of sitting down on Sunday night, picking out what recipes we're going to eat that week, and then using Walmart.com and ordering all those things. And then I pick it up on my way home from work on Monday night. And that's been a good way to both increase our health and help financially. It costs a lot less money to plan that out. So that's one way that we've been able to build good habits. What about you? Have you built any good habits in the last couple of years?
Well, I find that I think I go back and forth on some of these. Probably the biggest one is just consistent exercise. And I'm a person that is so routine oriented that once I get into a routine where it's built into my week, it doesn't tend to be that difficult for me to consistently keep that.
It's changing up that routine and adding something new into it?
If something happens to get me out of that routine, like a a break on the academic calendar,
Yeah.
or if we travel for a week or something like that, then it takes a lot of intentional effort to restart that pattern of behavior.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, I've recently gotten back more into the rhythm of exercising 3 days a week, and had to make the adjustment from running to getting on the exercise bike.
Because of the knees?
Knees just can't handle the impact, even on a treadmill, which is not as hard as running on streets or anything like that.
Elliptical in your future at all?
I can't do the elliptic. I don't. The movement just feels too unnatural to me.
Okay.
So I've enjoyed it for the most part, but again, building that kind of pattern of behavior has been something I feel like I'm starting to do. I'm not saying it's like locked in and I'm never going to depart from it, but I think that's a recent habit that I'm starting to cultivate in that area. And I think just something that came to mind as I was doing prep for this is just thinking about a couple of texts. Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 7, which is our church's memory verse as we're going through Deuteronomy. But sitting there yesterday and being reminded about how that passage talks about how you're supposed to talk about the ways of the Lord as you're getting up in the morning, as you're going to bed at night, as you're going about your daily activities. And it seems like it's advocating for, it's just built into the fabric of your life.
Yeah.
And that takes a measure of intentionality to create that consistency. But what's great about that passage as well is it starts by talking about about the command to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength, so that it's not just changing of external behaviors, that it's rooted in a heart change. It's rooted in a change of affection and desire as well.
Yeah.
And we'll circle back to that in a little bit, I think. But what about you? I guess you mentioned the
Yeah, I mean, exercise is one I picked up probably this time last year. And one of the things that was really helpful is going to the gym with someone. So me and Professor Pat here on campus would go to the gym most of the time together, 3 times a week, and there was shame if you didn't show up or
Yeah, I think the whole teaming up with somebody is a good piece of that, not just when it comes to exercise, though that helps. My wife and I regularly go together as inevitably one of us doesn't necessarily feel like going.
Sure.
And it varies.
Sure.
So one day it's me, one day it's her, And so the sort of extra motivation of, come on, I'm going, you can come with me, like we can do this, let's just get this done, is a big piece of that. And we'll maybe talk more about this, but you and I both teach Greek.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to talk about, like, I just remember, maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with the guys that you regularly studied with when it came to the languages.
Yeah. So one of the things we did for Hebrew mostly was our chaplain here, Brent, and Zach in Ohio, who we've interviewed on the pod before. The 3 of us took Hebrew together, and we would go to a coffee shop after class, and we would do about half the Hebrew homework together. And then we would leave for a day, and then we'd come back the next day, and we'd do the second half of the Hebrew together. And it was like doing it over a couple of days caused you to be like, okay, I get this concept, step away, forget the concept, come back, relearn the concept. And one of the things we did regularly is we just didn't leave the table until everybody around the table understood the concept. Vocabulary, we did a little bit of that, but most of that was on your own.
Right.
But yeah, it was a really good process. It made the language way more enjoyable.
Sure.
And the 3 of us are still good friends.
Yeah. And I think that kind of experience is one of the best ways to go through the languages. I mean, by default, because of the way the language courses work, you're with the same group of people all academic year.
Yep.
And so that just by its very nature tends to facilitate friendships and relational connections. But taking it to the next step of, okay, we're going to build into our schedule time together to study together, to work on homework, to sharpen one another, to help one another where necessary, to commiserate together.
Complain about the professor together,
Totally.
Complain about the midterm, final, whatever it is. Yeah.
So I think those are examples of, one of the ways to help build consistent habits is through accountability and joining with someone in doing it together.
Yeah.
Is a big piece of that. But I wanted to circle back to that the whole connection between our affections, our desires, our inclinations, and tie that back to the building of habits. Because one of the things that I know we're not advocating is just the building of external behaviors without actual heart level change. As I'm working on the Luke commentary right now, I'm in chapter 11, and it's the section where Jesus is condemning the Pharisees' hypocrisy. He's like, you tithe all down to the most minute herbs and things, but inside, you neglect justice and the love of God. And he's like, you shouldn't have. I'm not saying neglect the other things, like that's fine, but you've neglected the more important ones. And when you have that disconnect between internal desire, inclination, affection with external behavior, you deepen a level of hypocrisy. All of us have a disconnect to some degree between external behavior and what we know intellectually and what we know we should do and don't. But that's different from being fully aware of it and just being fine with it.
Yeah.
Maintaining external behaviors and not putting any effort into transforming internal heart level motivations and desires.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the more helpful things on this is this sermon by Thomas Chalmers. It's entitled "The Expulsive Power of a New Affection." And we'll have a link to John Piper's kind of forward to this in the show notes. But what's basically the point that he makes is, and this is more directed towards overcoming sinful desires.
Right, breaking bad habits. Which we haven't talked much about, but we would certainly be for.
Right. And saying that it's not enough to just try to stop doing whatever bad habit you're trying to stop.
Yeah.
That you need to replace your bad habit with a stronger desire for something better. And obviously in the spiritual realm, when you're talking about, killing sin and that kind of thing, it's not enough to just be like, I have to stop doing that. I got to stop thinking that. I've got to stop pursuing that. Obviously, there's a place for that, but without overcoming that with a stronger desire for something good, for something godly, your chances of success are pretty minimal at best.
Yeah.
And in the spiritual realm, obviously, the idea is that we become so much more compelled with the beauty of Christ that whatever sinful desire we have is overcome by that. So not necessarily that sinful desire disappears, but that the desire for Christ and being in awe of His beauty is sufficient to overcome that, so that you don't act on that sinful desire.
Yeah, it's like the old hymnist says, right? the things of this earth will grow strangely dim in the light of your beauty and grace. Like seeing the beauty of the gospel, seeing the beauty of Jesus Christ will draw us to something and away from something else.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I think, considering that whole area, of course I think it's appropriate for us to pray, God, take this sinful desire away from me. Well, of course that's appropriate to pray. But oftentimes God doesn't completely remove that sinful desire from us. Instead, ideally, he gives us a deeper and stronger desire for Christ so that when we're faced in that moment with temptation, that we're more compelled by the beauty of Christ than we are by whatever lie that sin is enticing us with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
do you want to tell your illustration here? I like your illustration that you have on the show notes.
I should probably look at my show notes. Oh, yeah. So in that introduction, Piper uses this illustration, which I think is super helpful. He says, if you had access to all the latest machinery in a sophisticated science lab, what would be the most effective way to get all the air out of a glass beaker? And so you think about, well, how would you get the air out of there? And
get a really powerful vacuum of some kind.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where my mind initially went. Yeah.
And the simple answer is fill it with water.
Yeah, fill it with something else.
Fill it with something else.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy in terms of overcoming whether it's sinful desire or even just bad habits that aren't inherently sinful, but are not best for you in terms of your life. So, also, we'll link to this article, the one that we talked about earlier on the Gospel Coalition. One of the things that it does helpfully is it gives suggestions for how to fill little gaps of time. So if you've got 1 minute between this or 5 minutes between this, I think if we're honest, almost all of us, our impulse is, well, I'll just check my phone. And whether it's checking social media, whether it's checking on the news or whatever it might be, oftentimes that just becomes a giant time vacuum.
Yes.
Where it just and the next thing you think, oh, I'll check that for like 30 seconds. And the next thing you know, you're like, I've burned 10 minutes doing this or longer. And you're like, gosh, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And this article on the Gospel Coalition makes some good suggestions for things that you can do to fill those gaps. Sometimes we'll suggest to our language students, if you've got a vocabulary app on your phone, which we recommend, instead of jumping onto social media, burn through a few vocab lessons or flashcards to kind of brush up on your vocabulary, just fitting in some of those gaps, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think
it is amazing how much time we waste on the phone.
Oh, yeah.
How much time we don't need. And I mean, one thing that I did in this last year was delete Facebook off my phone. It was kind of deleted for me. That's a longer story that I think we've told on pod.
Yes. Yes, I think we have.
But it was amazing how much time I received back. Thank you, hackers, out there. But how much time you waste on that device.
Yeah, absolutely.
Read a book.
Yes. So anything else you want to hit on this area of building habits?
Maybe one more resource. There's a book. I know we've mentioned it on the podcast maybe this time last year. There's a book called The Common Rule. Basically, it's strategies for creating rhythms in your life of how to seek God, even in a secular work environment, or just some simple like do this before that, like open Scripture before you look at your phone in the morning.
Yeah,
sorts of things.
Yep. That made me think of one other thing that I think would be helpful to mention here. On this dynamic between sort of heart level motivation and external actions and habits, that sort of thing, those ideally tend to be, I think, mutually reinforcing.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might have an intellectual recognition of, I need to do that. I have very little desire to do that. So you start to build in the external habit of doing it, And over time, ideally, what can happen is that the doing of that actually intensifies your enjoyment or the desire that you have for it. So that, sometimes I think people can get paralyzed of, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be one of these, Pharisees that, well, sometimes God uses the external actions to intensify or create even greater desire to actually do those things.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that I've seen people kind of overreact to I don't want to be a hypocrite, so until I want to do it, I'm not going to do it. Like, until I want to pray, I'm not going to pray. That's a terrible way to approach your spiritual life.
Yeah.
So that's a dynamic I think that's helpful to hit on. But in any case, it is time for us to move on, yes?
Yes.
So we are on to this day in sports history. What do we have on cue, John?
Yeah, so for January 18th, in 1976, Super Bowl 10 at the Orange Bowl in Miami, the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Cowboys. Lynn Swann, MVP.
Yes. Yep.
Is that after the reception, the Immaculate Reception?
That might have been, 76. I forget what year that was. I mean, the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls, and they had a gap year in between. They won 2 and then didn't make it, and then won 2 more. I can't remember where that fits in.
Okay. Have you ever been to the Western Pennsylvania Athletic Hall of Fame?
Surprisingly, no.
You need to go. They have it's worth the price of admission just because they have a statue of Lynn Swann doing the Immaculate Reception there.
Well, that's not – you're confusing things.
Am I confusing things?
Yeah. The Immaculate Reception is when they played the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. But the ball ricocheted off of a Pittsburgh or an Oakland.
No. It was Franco Harris caught it.
Franco Harris.
Yes.
Like caught it just above the turf. So it's Franco Harris.
Yes.
You're thinking of.
Well, they have a statue of it. They have a statue of Franco Harris at the Western Pennsylvania Hall of Fame, and it's like a good 18 inches off the ground.
Yeah, I'm sure it was not that in reality.
And you're just like, well, was it that far? Anyway, okay. So 1983, the International Olympic Committee, is that it?
Yep.
Restores Jim Thorpe's Olympic medals, the pentathlon and the decathlon victories.
Yes. Yeah, they had taken it away because he had been paid $25 to play semi-pro baseball. So seems like a solid decision to give those back.
In 1996, baseball owners unanimously approved interleague play
for the
97.
Yeah.
Which changed things dramatically.
Yeah, it has. It has. I mean, nowadays it just feels normal.
Yeah.
But that was a big deal when they made that decision.
Yeah, and I think it destroyed some of the mystery of the World Series a little bit.
Maybe.
I think there are some that really work. Like I think Yankees-Mets works quite well.
And White Sox-Cubs. Like
White
if there's
Sox-Cubs.
an obvious, very close, not rivalry, but it makes sense that Yankees and Mets would have an interest in playing each other in interleague. But some of these you're like, you're just like, why are these teams playing each other? This just feels weird.
Yeah, agreed. 2004 AFC Championship, New England Patriots beat the Colts 24-14. NFC Championship, Panthers beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship game.
Yep. Yeah.
In 2004. This was during the Eagles' run of getting to the NFC Championship game 6 years in a row or something like that. And this is the one time they made it to Carolina beat them. Yeah.
No. Yeah, so this was the Donovan McNabb years, right?
Mm-hmm. Where they were very, very good.
Yep. Yeah. And also it just struck me as I was doing the prep for this, the AFC the conference championship games. We just had the first weekend of playoffs. It just shows you how much they've started to push the season back with the new playoff format and the extra game in the regular season now and that sort of thing. So
even in 10, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got a preference out of this group? I've got one.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear yours. I don't necessarily have one.
I was going to go baseball.
You were going to go interleague play?
Yeah.
Okay.
That to me feels like probably the most significant out of that
Yeah.
group, just because it changed. It has changed the nature of baseball.
Absolutely.
So we'll go with that interleague play. One thing you liked?
This last week, I had 2 different speaking engagements. One, I spoke at Grace's Chapel. It was a little bit more of a topical sermon that was handed to me.
Yeah.
You get 30 minutes. But if you want to go find it, it's out there on Grace's Chapel's YouTube.
And it only took you like 5 minutes to get a Tim Keller quote in there?
I think it was like 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And then over the weekend, I spoke at a winter retreat, kind of doing a Bible 101 for high school, junior high students. So that was a lot of fun.
Is that like a youth group from a local church or like?
Yeah, it was a local church. So it was like 7 or 8 local churches came together and did a retreat together.
Okay.
And I probably had 50 or 60 in my breakout. I had a breakout session is what I had. So
okay.
I probably had
High school and junior high? Or?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, they all sort of look the same at some level, you know?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Like I feel like college age is kind of like my floor of where I feel reasonably comfortable teaching and speaking. You get below that, and especially into the junior high realm, and I feel like I'm lost.
Yeah.
In terms of figuring out how to connect with them and
Yeah.
So.
My jokes were definitely geared towards college students, and it did not always fall well with the junior high student in the room. But the adult leaders, I think, enjoyed it.
Yeah, so. That's true. That's true. So for me, I don't think I told you about this. So there's the Center for Biblical Foundations, I think is what it's called, that's run out of Midwestern Seminary. Each year they do book awards, book of the year from the previous year. And so I've been asked to be a finalist for the biblical theology category to assess a judge to assess all the different. So I agreed to do this, thinking, oh, this will be fun, and free books are always a nice thing.
How many books did they send you?
10.
10 books,
and
nice.
they gave me like less than 3 weeks to.
Wow.
And they sort of acknowledge in the email. Well, you're probably not going to be able to read every word of every book to be able to make your decision.
Wow.
Especially when they send, like one of them is Doug Moo's Pauline Theology. That's like a 750
Yeah, I was about to
page
say,
book.
isn't that like 800 pages? Yeah.
And so, but I've started cranking through a few of them and power reading them. So I've worked through a few of them. But the one that I'm working on right now and has a good chance to be either the winner or certainly one of the top 2 or 3, is a book by Daniel Block entitled Covenant, the Framework of God's Grand Plan of Redemption. Now, this is not a sort of leisure read.
Okay.
But it is a significant contribution. So if you're a ministry leader, a pastor, or just a very thoughtful lay level
armchair
academic. There you go. You will enjoy this book, even if you don't agree with every nuance of what he says. But very thoughtful, very engaging, and I'm enjoying it. So, well, we've talked about NFL playoffs. We've talked about our upcoming live episode. So, a reminder about that. If you're in the area, January 21st, Friday, at the MOCC here in Winona Lake, you can come watch that live. We've talked about building habits. And we didn't even mention the fact that this podcast has become a habit. We've built it into our lives, and now it's become a regular habit. We've talked about the creation of Interleague play. We have discussed our one thing that we liked, John getting out and about speaking, and me reading lots of books. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so time to call mission accomplished?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. All that's left to say is then until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.